The clock read 8 a.m. Ethan Cole signed the last paper and picked up his backpack. Everything he owned fit inside. "Good luck," the caseworker said without looking up. He walked through the front door and stood on the sidewalk. Looked left, looked right. No car, no one waving. He waited 30 seconds, long enough to be sure. Then he started walking. The autumn wind carried wet leaves. Somewhere in his memory, there was lavender, a hand stroking his hair, a voice, "Grandma will come back. I promise." That was 15 years ago. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Cole, Samuel Brooks. Attorney, I'm calling about an inheritance. Your grandmother passed 6 months ago." Ethan stopped walking. Grandmother. If you've ever waited for someone who didn't come, you're not alone. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from today. The law office sat above a hardware store on Main Street. Ethan climbed wooden stairs that groaned under each step. The hallway smelled like old paper and something burnt coffee left too long on a hot plate. A man opened the door before he could knock. Gray hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck, white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked tired. "Mr. Cole, I'm Samuel Brooks. Come in." The handshake was brief, firm grip, dry palm. The office was small desk buried under folders, a lamp with a yellow shade, 2 leather chairs cracked with age. Dust floated in the light from a single window. Ethan sat, his backpack pressed against his shins. Everything he owned was in that bag. "I'll get straight to it," Samuel said, lowering himself into the chair behind the desk. "Your grandmother left you property, 20 acres out on Miller Road. Small house, no cash, no other assets." Ethan's hands stayed flat on his knees. "I don't have a grandmother." Samuel paused, took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You did. Margaret Cole. She passed 6 months ago. Heart attack." He set the glasses on the desk. "She died alone. 6 months." The words landed like stones. 6 months she had been dead. No one called. No one sent a letter. He hadn't known. "Why me?" Samuel looked at him, held the gaze longer than comfortable. "You were the only family she had left." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small key. Old, rust creeping along one edge. He placed it on the desk between them. "She gave me specific instructions. Wait until your 18th birthday to make contact. Not a day before." Samuel pushed the key forward. "She said, while you were in the system, you couldn't make your own choices. She wanted you to have this when you were free to decide for yourself." Ethan picked up the key. Cold. Lighter than it looked. The rust left a faint orange smudge on his thumb. "Did she ever try to reach me before she died?" Samuel's hands stopped moving. He stared at the papers on his desk, at the window, at anything but Ethan. The silence stretched. "You should see the property first," he finally said. "See what she left you." "That's not an answer." Samuel met his eyes. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite guilt. Not quite sadness. "I know it isn't." He leaned back in his chair. "But I don't think you'd believe me if I told you. Son, some things you have to see for yourself." Ethan's grip tightened on the key. The rust bit into his palm. What was she hiding? The dirt road stretched for 2 miles before the house appeared. Ethan gripped the steering wheel of the group home's borrowed van. The caseworker had given him 24 hours with it, enough time to see the property and come back. After that, he was on his own. Dry grass spread on both sides of the road, brown and yellow, bending under the October wind. A wooden fence ran along the property line. Half the posts had collapsed, leaning at angles like they would given up trying to stand. Then he saw it. The house sat at the end of the drive. Small, 1 story, white paint peeled off the clapboards in long strips. The porch sagged to the left, pulling away from the front wall. On the far corner, the roof had caved-in shingles scattered across the dead lawn like broken teeth. He parked and killed the engine. Sat there. The only sound was wind pushing through gaps in the van's doors and the tick of the cooling engine. This was it. Everything his grandmother had left him. He grabbed his backpack and stepped out. The air smelled like dust and dry weeds and something else underneath: decay. His boots crunched on gravel as he walked toward the porch. 3 wooden steps. He tested the first one with his weight. It groaned but held. The second step had a hole where the wood had rotted through. He stepped over it. The key fit the lock, but the mechanism was stiff. He had to force it, wiggling the key back and forth until something clicked. The door swung inward with a long creak. Dust. That was the first thing. Thick on every surface, floating in shafts of light that came through holes in the roof. Motes drifted slowly, disturbed by the door's movement. The second thing was the smell: mold and stale air and something that had been closed up for too long. 6 months, he thought. 6 months since anyone had opened this door. Ethan stepped inside. A wooden table stood in the center of the main room. 2 chairs tucked beneath it. One of the chairs had a broken leg, propped up with a folded newspaper. A kitchen open to the right cabinets, hanging crooked. Some doors missing entirely. Dishes still stacked inside. A cast-iron skillet sat on the stovetop. A thin layer of grease congealed in the bottom. Against the far wall, a single bed. The blankets were folded neatly at the foot. The pillow still dented where a head had rested. A rocking chair sat by the window, its cushion faded from years of sun, the fabric torn along one seam. She had lived here, alone, for years. His throat tightened. He swallowed it down and kept moving. The floorboards creaked with each step. Dust rose in small clouds around his boots. He opened a cabinet, canned food lined up in rows. Labels faded, all expired. A coffee mug with a chip on the rim. A dish towel, stiff with age, hanging from a hook. He walked to the back door and pushed it open. The hinges screamed. The garden spread out before him, or what was left of it. Fruit trees stood in crooked rows, apple, maybe, or pear. The branches were bare, bark peeling in strips, some limbs broken and hanging. A vegetable patch had gone wild, weeds choking whatever had once grown there. Tomato cages lay rusted and collapsed. A wheelbarrow sat overturned near a shed, its wheel missing. Everything brown, everything dead, except one thing in the corner of the garden, by the back fence, a small bush, lavender. The stems were dry and brittle, the flowers long gone, but the shape was unmistakable. The silvery gray leaves, the woody base. Ethan walked toward it, knelt down in the dirt, touched the brittle stems. The smell hit him, faint, barely there, but enough. Lavender. The memory came without warning. He was small 3, maybe 4. A hand stroking his hair. A voice, soft and low. The smell of lavender soap on warm skin. The face was blurry, lost to time, but the feeling remained. Safe, held. Grandma will come back. I promise. His hand pulled away from the bush. He stood, brushing dirt from his knees. She never came back. 15 years of silence. And now this dead land. A broken house. A bush that had dried up, waiting for someone to tend it. He looked down at the lavender again. The stems were brittle, but the roots looked firm where they met the soil. Not rotted, not dead, just dormant, waiting for spring that might never come. He went back inside. The light was fading now, orange and pink through the holes in the roof. Shadows growing in the corners. He should leave, return the van, figure out what this place was worth and sell it. Move on. But something held him. He looked at the floor, at the way dust had settled in patterns thicker in some places, thinner where air moved through cracks. Near the old fireplace, one board sat slightly higher than the others, a gap at the edge, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Ethan crouched down, pressed his fingers against the wood. It shifted. His pulse quickened. He worked his fingers into the gap and pulled. The board came up with a grinding sound. Nails rusted through, leaving orange streaks on the wood. Beneath it, a hollow space, dark. He reached inside. His fingers touched cloth, something wrapped in fabric, soft with age. He pulled it out carefully. A journal, leather cover, worn smooth from handling. And beside it in the hollow, a small tin box with a hinged lid. He set the box aside and held the journal. Dust clung to the leather. He wiped it away with his sleeve. Handwriting on the cover, faded blue ink. The letters shaky but legible. For Ethan, when you're ready. His hands trembled. He noticed it, the slight shake he couldn't control. He opened the first page. The writing inside was unsteady too. Written by someone old, or tired, or sick. Maybe all 3? Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. I tried to reach you for 15 years. They made it nearly impossible. There are things you need to know about your mother, about me, and about why I couldn't be there. Don't sell the land yet. Read everything first. Then you decide. He read the words again, and again. His eyes stuck on one phrase. They made it nearly impossible. Who had made it impossible? He turned the page. December 2009. I wrote to you today. Sent it to the address the county gave me. The letter came back 3 weeks later. Return to sender. They said you weren't at that address anymore. But I checked. I know you were there. Another page. March 2011. I went to the foster office again, asked if I could have a current address. The woman pulled my file, looked at it for a long time, then said she couldn't help me, said my name was flagged, said contact wasn't in the child's best interest. I asked what that meant. She wouldn't explain. Ethan's chest compressed. The air in the room seemed thicker. He turned more pages, entry after entry, year after year. 2013. Fourth petition denied. 2015. Sixth petition. They didn't even let me finish speaking. 2017. I drove 4 hours to the state office. Brought Pastor Williams as a character witness. They said the original assessment stands. History of mental instability. That's all I am to them now. A flag in a file. 7 petitions. 12 years. Hundreds of letters. He closed the journal. His hand shook openly now. The room had gone dark. Just a thin line of red light through the western window. The last of the sun disappearing below the horizon. He looked around at the dust, the decay, the silence of a house where someone had lived alone for years, waiting for something that never came. His eyes went back to the journal. There were more pages, many more, but near the end, something was wrong. A gap in the binding, torn edges where paper had been. The last page was missing. He reached for the tin box, lifted the lid with trembling fingers. Inside, folded, small and tight, a single sheet of paper. She had separated it from the rest, hidden it in a different place. Why? He unfolded it carefully. The paper soft and fragile from being handled. The first line made him stop breathing. Ethan, if you're reading this, you are 18 now. You are an adult. No one can make decisions for you anymore. Ethan read through the night. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, phone flashlight cutting a yellow beam through the darkness. The journal lay open in his lap. Pages brittle under his fingers. Outside, wind rattled the loose shingles. Inside, only the sound of paper turning and his own breathing. The entries jumped between months, sometimes years. His grandmother's handwriting changed as he moved through the pages, steady at first, then shakier, the letters growing smaller toward the end, as if she was running out of bobswell or time. January 2010. I sent another letter today. Used a different return address this time, thinking maybe that would help. It came back 3 weeks later, unopened. Return to sender. I don't understand how they know. April 2010. Called the foster office in Jefferson County. Asked where Ethan was placed now. The woman said she couldn't give out that information. I told her I was his grandmother. She said that didn't matter. My name wasn't on the approved contact list. His eyes burned. He rubbed them with the heel of his hand and kept reading. November 2012. 5th petition today. I brought medical records showing I've been stable for 12 years. Letters from my doctor, from Pastor Williams, from Sarah at the diner. The caseworker didn't look at any of them, just stamped the form and handed it back. Assessment stands. That's all she said. August 2014. I should hire a lawyer. I know that. But lawyers cost money I don't have. The roof leaked again last week, and I had to choose between fixing it and paying the electric bill. I chose the roof. I'm writing this by candlelight. The pages blurred. Ethan blinked hard, forcing his eyes to focus. March 2016. A woman at the state office told me today that my file has a red flag. 20 years ago, after my daughter died, I spent 3 months in a hospital. Depression, severe, they called it. I was grieving. My only child was dead. What did they expect? But that's all I am now. A flag, a warning. They see those 3 months and nothing else. Not the 12 years since. Not the letters. Not the 7 times I've asked. Just the flag. He read until the battery warning flashed on his phone. Then he sat in complete darkness, the weight of the journal pressing against his legs like something alive. When gray light finally crept through the holes in the roof, he still hadn't slept. The town was 7 miles down the main road, one street running through the center, buildings on either side, a hardware store, a church with a white steeple, a post office the size of a shed on the corner, a diner with a neon sign that read Sarah's in faded red letters. One of the letters flickered on and off. A bell jingled when Ethan pushed open the door. Warm air hit his face, carrying the smell of bacon grease and coffee that had been sitting too long. Formica tables lined the windows. A counter stretched along the back wall. Stools with cracked red vinyl seats bolted to the floor. A woman looked up from behind the counter. 50? Maybe. Gray streaked through brown hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, apron dusted with flour, a dish towel over her shoulder. Morning. She reached for a white mug and the coffee pot without asking. Sit anywhere you like. Ethan took a stool at the counter. She set the mug in front of him and poured. The coffee was dark and smelled burnt. Passing through. Not exactly. He wrapped his hands around the mug. The heat seeped into his cold fingers. I'm staying at the Cole property, out on Miller Road. Her hands stopped. The coffee pot hung suspended in the air. Margaret's place. You knew her. She set the pot down slowly. Her eyes moved over his face, his jaw, his forehead. His eyes like she was searching for something. Well, I'll be... Her voice dropped. You're Ethan. His stomach tightened. How did you know? You look like your mother. Around the eyes especially. She extended her hand across the counter. Sarah Mitchell, I own this place. Your grandmother came here every Tuesday for years. Same booth, same order. Toast and black coffee. Never anything else. Ethan shook her hand. Her grip was firm. Palm rough from work. Sarah leaned against the counter, arms crossed. She talked about you, you know, not by name at first, just the boy. Every month, she'd ask me the same thing. Any news about the boy? I didn't understand what she meant for the longest time. She shook her head. Didn't know there was a boy to have news about. She never explained. Just asked. Every single month. Regular as the seasons. His grip tightened on the mug. The coffee had stopped steaming. Did she ever tell you why she couldn't see me? Sarah's expression shifted. Something moved behind her eyes. She wasn't one for talking about personal things. Private woman. Proud, too, in her way. She wiped her hands on the towel, though they didn't look wet. But I knew enough. Knew the system had her name marked somehow. Knew she'd been trying for years to get through. Knew she wrote letters that kept coming back. She reached beneath the counter and pulled out a small wooden box. Old, with brass hinges, the kind that might hold recipes or photographs. She gave me this a few years back. When she found out she was sick, Sarah opened the lid and took something out of photograph, black and white, edges worn soft from handling. She placed it on the counter between them. Ethan looked down. A woman stood in front of a house. The house as it must have been years ago. Roof intact, porch level, garden, green and alive behind her. She held a bundle of lavender in her hands, stems tied with string. Her hair was gray, face lined with age, but her back was straight. She looked directly into the camera. Her eyes weren't sad. Not exactly. They were patient, waiting. The eyes of someone who had learned to wait a very long time. "That's the only picture I have of her," Sarah said quietly. "She told me to give it to whoever came asking. Figured someone would." Eventually, Ethan picked up the photograph. The paper was soft between his fingers, fragile with age. This was his grandmother, the woman who had written letters that never arrived, filed petitions that were always denied, asked about him every month for 15 years. He had never seen her face until this moment. "Did she talk about my family?" His voice came out rough. "My mother..." Sarah's hand went to the towel again. She rubbed the fabric between her fingers. "Some. Your mother passed when you were little, 3 years old. I think she said, car accident." She paused. "Margaret never recovered from that. Not fully. She spent time in the hospital afterward for the grief. And that's why they wouldn't let her see me. That's how those systems work, I reckon. You get one mark against you, and it follows you around forever. Doesn't matter how long ago. Doesn't matter if you got better." Sarah shook her head. "Margaret was the steadiest person I knew. But that file, it was like a wall she couldn't climb over. And she didn't have money for lawyers who might have helped." Ethan set the photograph on the counter. His chest felt tight, compressed. "There's something else," Sarah said. She spoke more slowly now, choosing her words. "A few years back, a man came around, suit and tie, nice car, said he was from some development company, wanted to buy your grandmother's land. What happened?" She said no. "He kept coming back 3 times over the next year. Offered more money each visit." A small smile crossed Sarah's face, then faded. "Last time, he said something to her. I don't know what exactly. But Margaret grabbed a broom from behind this very counters and chased him halfway to his car." She paused. "Afterward, she sat right where you're sitting now, hands shaking, and she said to me, 'That land is the only thing I can leave for the boy. They took everything else from me. That they can't take.'" Ethan stared at the photograph, at the woman holding lavender, at the eyes that had waited so long. They took everything else. Who were they? The system, the real estate company, someone else entirely. And what else had they taken? The farmhouse 3 miles down the road had a mailbox that read green in faded black letters. Ethan had found the name in his grandmother's journal. A single entry from 2015 Walter Green. Neighbor. Used to bring eggs. Hasn't spoken to me in 2 years now. I think he believes the rumors. The house was neat. White paint without a single peel. Green shutters straight on their hinges. Lawn trimmed short even in October. A pickup truck sat in the driveway. Mud crusted on the wheel wells, but otherwise clean. The contrast with his grandmother's place was sharp enough to sting. Ethan parked the van and walked to the front door. He knocked 3 times before footsteps approached. The man who answered was 70 at least, weathered face, deep creases around the mouth, eyes that narrowed the moment they saw Ethan. He wore a flannel shirt tucked into belted jeans and stood with his arms already crossing over his chest. "Help you, Mr. Green. I'm Ethan Cole, Margaret Cole's grandson." And the man's expression didn't change. Margaret didn't have family. She did. Me. Walter Green leaned against the doorframe. His eyes moved over Ethan, the worn jacket. The backpack visible in the van. The tired look of someone who hadn't slept. "What do you want?" "I'm trying to understand some things. About my grandmother. About why she lived alone out here." "She lived alone because she wanted to." Walter shrugged. "Woman barely said 2 words to anyone. Kept to herself year after year. Strange, if you ask me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Strange how... just strange." Another shrug. Dismissive this time. "Never came to church. Never showed up to town meetings. Just sat on that porch of hers staring at the road, like she was waiting for a bus that was never going to come." He tapped his temple with one finger. "Always figured there was something off with her. Up here." "Did she ever talk to you about why she was waiting?" "She tried once. Years back. Came over asking if I'd seen any official-looking cars on the road. Government cars," she said. Walter's lip curled slightly. "I told her I don't keep track of other people's business." She got the message. Never asked again. Ethan's hands curled into fists at his sides. He forced them open. "Did you know she had a grandson?" "Like I said, she didn't talk, didn't share." Walter straightened, his hand moving to the door. "Look, son, I don't know what you're hoping to find out here. Margaret Cole was a lonely woman who died alone. That's the whole story. Nothing more to it." He stepped back and closed the door. The lock clicked. Ethan stood on the porch for a long moment. Wind moved through the perfect lawn, bending the grass in waves. From somewhere behind the house came the cluck of chickens. A lonely woman who died alone. That's what the neighbor saw. That's all he wanted to see. Ethan walked back to the van. He returned to his grandmother's house as the afternoon light turned gold. The journal sat on the kitchen table where he'd left it, dust motes drifting in the slanted sun. He sat down and opened it to where he'd stopped. June 2013. "I drove to Jefferson City today, 4 hours each way. The state office there has a different supervisor. I thought maybe she would listen. She didn't. Same answer every time. Your file has a red flag. We can't approve contact." I asked what it would take to remove the flag. She shuffled papers for a minute, then said she didn't know. Said, "Some flags just stay?" He turned more pages. The entries grew shorter as the years passed. More space between dates, as if she was losing the energy to write. September 2014. The letters keep coming back. I've tried everything, different addresses, different names on the return. Nothing works. the few that might get through. He's been in so many placements, moved around so much. Maybe he's seen my name and doesn't know who I am. Maybe he throws them away. Maybe he never gets them at all. I don't know anymore. February 2016, sixth petition. The woman at the desk recognized me this time. She didn't even pretend to look at the paperwork, just stamped it and handed it back. Assessment stands, in 2 words. 12 years of trying and all I get is 2 words. I know what they see when they look at my file. 3 months in a hospital. 20 years ago, my daughter had just died. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop crying. So I asked for help. And asking for help became the thing that took everything from me. Ethan's throat constricted. He swallowed against it and kept reading. April 2017. I should hire a lawyer. I know that. Everyone tells me that. But there's the roof and the truck and the property taxes, and I've already borrowed what I can from the bank. Margaret Cole isn't worth much on paper. I don't have family to ask. I don't have anyone. All I have is this land, and I'll keep it, because someday, when he's old enough, he can decide for himself whether to come find me. His phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with an unknown number. Local area code. He stared at it for 2 rings. 3? Then it picked up. Mr. Cole, a man's voice. Smooth. Professional. This is Richard Hayes from Midwest Development Partners. I understand you recently inherited the Cole property on Miller Road. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Property transfers are public record. Mr. Cole. The county files them within a few days of closing. The voice stayed pleasant, unhurried. I'll be direct with you. We've been interested in that parcel for several years. We made offers to your grandmother, but she declined. We're hoping you might be more receptive. Ethan looked around the room. Dust on every surface. Holes in the roof. The smell of mold seeping from the walls. I'm listening. We're prepared to offer $80,000. Cash. Quick closing. You could have the money in your account within 2 weeks. $80,000. More money than Ethan had ever imagined having. Enough to rent an apartment somewhere. Buy a car that wasn't borrowed. Start over in a city where nobody knew his name. Why does the company want this land so badly? Location. Mr. Cole. Proximity to the highway. Access roads. Room for development. It's simply good business. A pause. I should mention, we do have a timeline. Our project is moving forward with or without this parcel. The offer is good for 2 weeks. After that, I can't guarantee the same terms. Ethan stared at the journal open on the table. An entry from 2017, his grandmother's handwriting growing shaky. All I have is this land. I need to think about it. Of course. Take your time within the 2 weeks. I mean, the voice stayed smooth. I'll be in touch. Mr. Cole. The line went dead. Ethan set the phone down. The screen glowed briefly, then faded to black. $80,000, a way out, a clean break from everything. He picked up the journal and turned the page. December 2017. I went to the doctor today. He found something in the tests. Wants to run more. I didn't ask what he thought it was. I can feel it already. Something wrong. Something growing. Whatever time I have left, I need to use it. I need to make sure Ethan has something when this is over. Something they can't take away from him the way they took everything else. Ethan stopped breathing. She knew. She knew she was dying. And she kept holding on anyway. He looked at the phone, at the journal, at the holes in the roof, letting in the fading light. $80,000. 2 weeks to decide. But the journal had more pages. And his grandmother had tried for 12 years against a system designed to stop her. If she fought that hard for that long, who exactly had she been fighting? The stairs creaked the same way they had 5 days ago. Same smell of old paper and burnt coffee. Same yellow light through the frosted glass. Ethan knocked twice. Samuel Brooks opened the door, and his face changed. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not surprise exactly, but recognition, like he'd been expecting this visit. "Mr. Cole, come in." Ethan didn't sit this time. He stood in the center of the small office, the journal in his hand. "You knew." Samuel moved slowly to his desk. He didn't ask what Ethan meant, didn't deny anything. He just lowered himself into his chair and folded his hands on the worn leather blotter. "What do you want to know?" "Everything you didn't tell me the first time." Samuel let out a long breath. His shoulders dropped the posture of a man finally setting down something heavy. "Your grandmother was my client for 12 years. She first came to me in 2009, right after you entered the foster system. She wanted to file for guardianship. And I told her it would be difficult." Samuel pulled off his glasses and set them on the desk. Without them, his eyes looked older, tired. "Her file had a flag. Do you know what happened to your mother?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Car accident. I was 3. Your grandmother identified the body." Samuel's voice dropped lower. "Your mother was her only child. And Margaret, she didn't handle it well. Nobody would have. But the system doesn't account for circumstances. It only sees records." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thin folder, edges worn soft from handling. "She spent 3 months in a psychiatric hospital. Severe depression. They called it. She was grieving. Her daughter was dead. But back then, they didn't use words like grief counseling or trauma response. They wrote mental instability and put it in her permanent file." Ethan's grip on the journal tightened. The leather creased under his fingers. "When you went into foster care, Margaret petitioned for custody immediately. But the moment they ran her background, that hospitalization came up. 20 years old by then. But it didn't matter. The flag was there. They classified her as an unfit guardian." "Unfit?" The word came out flat, hollow. "That's what the paperwork said." Samuel leaned back in his chair. "I helped her file an appeal. Then another. Then another. 7 petitions over 12 years, every single one denied. Same reason every time: history of mental instability, insufficient evidence of rehabilitation. She was rehabilitated. She'd been stable for decades. I know that. You know that. The caseworkers probably knew it too." Samuel spread his hands. "But systems don't run on common sense. Son, they run on check boxes. Once your grandmother's box was checked, it stayed checked. And she couldn't afford lawyers who might have found a way around it. Every dollar she had went into keeping that property. Ethan's legs felt unsteady. He reached for the chair and lowered himself into it. What about the letters? She wrote that they kept coming back. Samuel nodded slowly. Foster care has protocols for contact from flagged individuals. Letters get returned. Phone calls get blocked or screened. The system is designed to protect children from people who might harm them. He paused. But it doesn't distinguish between someone dangerous and someone inconvenient. Your grandmother was inconvenient, a reminder that the system had made a decision it didn't want to revisit. So they just blocked her out for 15 years. They made it nearly impossible. Yes, some letters probably got through, but you were moved around so much. Different placements, different addresses. Even if one reached you, you might not have known who she was. You were so young when it all started. Samuel's voice softened. And every time she pushed harder, they warned her that continued interference might result in you being transferred farther away. She was terrified of losing track of you entirely. The office was silent, except for the tick of a clock on the wall. Ethan hadn't noticed it before. Now each second seemed to land with weight. Why didn't you tell me this before? Samuel looked at him directly for the first time since he'd sat down. Because Margaret asked me not to. She wanted you to find the journal first, to read it in her own words. He leaned forward. She said if I just told you, you might not believe it, might think it was an excuse someone made up to make you feel better. But if you read it yourself, the dates, the details, her handwriting, then you'd know it was real. Ethan looked down at the journal in his hands, at the entries he'd spent the last 2 nights reading. The dates, the rejections, the letters returned unopened. She told me something else, too. Samuel's voice changed. Quieter now, almost gentle. The last time I saw her, she just filed her 7th petition, the one with Pastor Williams. It was denied that same morning. He stopped, swallowed. She sat right where you're sitting now, didn't say anything for a long time, just looked at the rejection letter like she was trying to understand how words on paper could keep destroying her life. Ethan's throat closed. He waited. Then she looked up at me and said, if I can't go to him, I'll make a place where he can come to me. When he's old enough to decide for himself, when no one can tell him no anymore. The clock ticked. Outside, a car passed on the street below. Engine fading to distance. That's why she held onto the land, Samuel said. Why she turned down every offer. No matter how much they raised the price, she wasn't keeping it for herself. She was keeping it for you. Ethan stood. The chair scraped against the wooden floor. There's a page missing from the journal. At the end, she tore it out and hid it somewhere else. Samuel's eyebrows rose slightly. I didn't know that. I found it in a tin box under the floorboards. I haven't read it yet. He moved toward the door, then stopped, turned back. 7 petitions, 12 years of trying. Yes. And I spent 18 years believing nobody wanted me. Samuel didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Ethan walked out, down the creaking stairs, into the late afternoon light. He drove without seeing the road. The fields passed in a blur of brown and fading gold. The sun dropped lower, stretching long shadows across the pavement. Halfway back to the property, he pulled the van to the shoulder, killed the engine. 7 petitions, hundreds of letters. 12 years of fighting a system that had already decided she wasn't worth listening to. And every day of his life, he had believed he was unwanted, abandoned, not worth keeping. If everything he had believed was wrong, then who was he? The journal sat on the passenger seat. Beside it, the tin box with its hinged lid. Inside that box was the last page, the one she had separated from all the others, the one she had hidden in a different place, to be found last. What had she needed to tell him that couldn't go with the rest? The house was dark when Ethan returned. He didn't turn on lights, didn't need them. The moon hung full and bright, pouring silver through the holes in the roof, casting strange patterns across the dusty floor. He sat at the kitchen table. The tin box rested in his hands, cold metal against his palms. Such a small thing to contain so much. For a long moment, he just held it, felt its weight, listened to the wind pushing against the walls outside. Then he opened the lid. The paper inside was folded into a tight square, creased soft from handling. His grandmother had touched this, had folded it carefully with her own hands, had hidden it away from everything else, separate, special. His fingers trembled as he unfolded it. The handwriting was shakier than anywhere else in the journal, weaker, written by someone who knew her time was running out. Ethan, if you're reading this, you are 18 now. You are an adult. No one can make decisions for you anymore. He stopped. Read the line again. Let it settle into him. I need you to understand something. And I need you to believe it not because I'm telling you, but because it's true. I did not abandon you. When your mother died, I fell apart. I won't pretend otherwise. She was my only child. Losing her broke something inside me that I didn't know could break. I spent 3 months in a hospital, trying to put the pieces back together. I thought I was doing the right thing, asking for help, getting better, so I could take care of you. But the system doesn't see it that way. To them, those 3 months became everything I am. A flag, a warning, evidence that I'm unstable and unfit. When you were placed in foster care, I tried to get custody. They said no. I tried again. They said no again. I tried 7 times over 12 years. Every single time, the same answer. My file, my history, my 3 months of grief. 20 years ago, Ethan's hands shook harder. The paper rattled in his grip. I wrote to you hundreds of letters over the years. Most came back unopened. The few that might have gotten through you were moved so often. So many different placements. Maybe some reached you and you didn't know who I was. Maybe you were too young to remember. I don't know. I called. I drove to offices and group homes. I begged. And every time I pushed harder, they told me the same thing if I kept interfering. They would transfer you out of state. I would lose you completely. So I stopped pushing. Not because I wanted to, because I was terrified. Terrified that my trying would hurt you more than my silence. His vision blurred. He blinked, and wetness ran down his face. He didn't wipe it away. I know what you must have believed all these years, that nobody wanted you, that you weren't worth fighting for, that you were alone because something was wrong with you. Ethan, I fought for you every single day. I just couldn't let you see it. And for that, for all those years you spent not knowing, I am so deeply sorry. This land is all I have left to give you. It isn't much. The house is falling apart. The garden died a long time ago. There's no money, no savings, nothing valuable by the world's standards. But it's mine, and now it's yours. Something no one can flag or deny or send back unopened. Something that belongs to you. You can sell it, walk away, take the money, and start fresh. Somewhere, no one knows your name. I won't blame you. I would understand. Or you can stay. Fix what's broken. Plant what's dead. Build something that's yours. Either way, I need you to know one thing. The thing I couldn't say in person, couldn't write in any letter that would actually reach you. You have always had value. You have always been loved. You were never abandoned. I was here the whole bum. You just couldn't see me. I love you. Ethan, I always did. Grandma, the paper slipped from his fingers. It drifted to the floor, landing in the dust. Ethan sat motionless. The words echoed through his skull, looping back, repeating, "You have always had value." He had spent 18 years believing the opposite. 18 years telling himself the same story every morning. No one wants you. You're not worth keeping. You're the kid nobody chose. He had built his entire identity on that rotten foundation. Every decision he'd ever made, every time he didn't try, didn't hope, didn't reach out, because what was the point? He already knew how it would end. He knew because he was broken, worthless, unlovable, and it was wrong. All of it. Not a lie someone had told him. A lie he had told himself. A lie he had chosen to believe because it was easier than hoping and being hurt again. His grandmother had fought for 12 years, had written hundreds of letters, had driven for hours to offices that turned her away, had begged and pleaded and filed petition after petition while he sat in group homes and foster placements, telling himself nobody cared. And what had he done? Nothing. He had done nothing. Had believed the worst story about himself without question. Had given up before he even knew there was someone who never stopped trying. The shame hit him like a fist to the chest. His body folded forward. His hands grabbed the edge of the table, knuckles white. A sound came from his throat. Not a word. Not a cry. Something rawer than both. He stood up. The chair crashed behind him. He needed out. Needed air. The back door banged open under his hands. He stumbled down the porch steps, into the dead garden. The moon was too bright. It showed everything: the dead trees, the weeds, the decay. His grandmother's 12 years of love rotting in the ground because he hadn't known, hadn't looked, hadn't asked. His foot caught on something, a root, a rock, the edge of a collapsed tomato cage. He went down hard. Hands and knees hit the earth, cold and damp from recent rain. Mud soaked through his jeans, pressed against his palms. Dirt worked under his fingernails, into the creases of his skin. He didn't get up. He stayed there on his hands and knees in his grandmother's dead garden, and the tears came. Not quiet tears, ugly ones. The kind that twist your face and steal your breath. The kind that come from somewhere deeper than sadness. From shame. So thick, it feels like drowning. 18 years. 18 years of telling himself he was garbage. And she had been here, waiting, hoping, loving him from across a distance she couldn't cross. He had never written her a letter, never tried to find her, never even wondered if there might be another side to the story. He had just accepted it, swallowed the lie whole, and built his life around it. Made decisions based on believing he was worthless. Kept people away because he figured they'd leave anyway. Stopped hoping because hope hurt too much. His fists closed around handfuls of mud, cold, dead, like everything else here. But not everything. Through the blur of tears, he saw it, the lavender bush, still standing in its corner by the fence. The flowers were gone, the stems were dry, but it wasn't dead. Not completely. The roots were firm in the soil, waiting the way she had waited. Ethan stayed on his knees in the mud. The cold seeped through his clothes, into his skin. His breath came in ragged, broken gasps. Somewhere in the house, his phone buzzed. The real estate company. 3 days left on their deadline. $80,000 waiting if he wanted to run. Or he could stay in the dirt with the dead garden and the broken house and the grandmother who had loved him even when he couldn't feel it. The mud was soaking through to his bones now. He could smell it, earth and decay and something underneath that might have been growing. What was he supposed to do with any of this? Morning came gray and cold. Ethan woke on the kitchen floor, back against the wall. Mud still caked on his jeans and hands. His face was stiff with dried salt. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache. He looked at his hands, at the dirt ground into every crease, under every nail, at the mud dried brown on his palms. He had fallen apart last night, completely. Had knelt in the dirt and cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child. Had let the shame take him all the way down. And now it was morning, and he was still here. He pushed himself up. His joints popped. His head throbbed. He walked to the sink and turned the handle. The pipes groaned, coughed rust, then released a thin stream of water. He let it run until it cleared, then splashed his face, cold, sharp, real. He dried his hands on his shirt and walked outside. The sun was clearing the horizon, painting the dead grass in shades of amber and gold. The air smelled like frost and damp earth. His boots left prints in the soft ground, as he stepped off the porch. He walked. No direction. Just walked. Past the collapsed fence posts with their rusted wire. Past the dead fruit trees with bark peeling in long strips. Past the vegetable patch choked with weeds and rotted cages. He stopped at the far edge of the property, turned and looked back. The house was small from here, small and broken, roof sagging on one side, walls weathered to gray, a ruin by any measure, but the land spread out around it. 20 acres, flat and brown now, but land, real land, space, room to breathe. He tried to see it the way his grandmother must have seen it. Not what it was, but what it could become. The fence could be rebuilt, new posts, new wire. The dead trees could be cleared and replaced with saplings. The vegetable patch could be turned over and replanted. The house would need work, more work than he knew how to do. But work could be learned. He walked back toward the house, stopped at the lavender bush, crouched down, looked closer. The stems were dry and brittle above the soil line, but down near the base, where stem met earth, the roots looked firm, solid, alive beneath the dead wood, waiting for conditions to change. The sound of an engine broke the silence. Ethan straightened and turned. A black SUV was coming up the dirt road, trailing dust behind it, new, polished, out of place against the brown fields. It stopped in front of the house. The engine cut. A man stepped out, suit dark gray, perfectly pressed, shoes that caught the morning light, polished leather, already collecting dust. 45, maybe, clean-shaven jaw, a smile that showed teeth but didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Cole, he walked forward with his hand extended. Richard Hayes. We spoke on the phone. Ethan didn't take the hand. You drove all the way out here. I was in the area. Thought a face-to-face conversation might be more productive, more... And the smile stayed him fixed as he lowered his hand. Mind if I take a look around? He didn't wait for an answer. He turned in a slow circle, surveying the property, the collapsed fence, the dead garden, the house with its sagging roof. His smile widened. I can see why you might want to move on from this. Place needs a lot of work, more than most people want to take on. He turned back to Ethan. You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Why tie yourself to an old woman's falling down house? Ethan said nothing. Hayes reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. White, crisp, official looking. We've revised our offer. $100,000. Cash. We can close by the end of the week. He held out the envelope. You walk away with enough money to start over anywhere you want. College, apartment in a real city, a future that doesn't involve fixing someone else's mistakes. 100,000. The number hung in the air between them. More money than Ethan had ever seen. More than he'd ever imagined having. Enough to disappear. Enough to become someone else entirely. Why does your company want this land so badly? I told you. Location. Development potential. It's business. Hayes's smile flickered, just for a second. Your grandmother didn't understand that. She held on to this place out of sentiment. And look what it got her, years alone in a house that was falling apart around her. Is that really what you want for yourself? Ethan looked at the envelope, at the house behind him, at the dead garden where he'd knelt in the mud last night. She didn't hold on to it out of sentiment. Excuse me. She held on to it because it was the only thing she could give me, the only thing the system couldn't take away. Hayes's expression shifted. The smile thinned. That's touching. But sentiment doesn't pay for a new roof. Mr. Cole, it doesn't fix the plumbing or replace the windows or put food on the table. He stepped closer. You have nothing. No money, no job, no skills that matter out here. Take the 100,000, build an actual life. Leave this behind. Leave it behind. The words sounded so reasonable, so easy. Ethan looked at the house, at the porch where his grandmother must have sat, watching the road, at the kitchen window where she might have stood, hoping to see a car turn down the drive. She had fought for 12 years, had written letters and filed petitions and driven hours to offices that turned her away. She could have given up, could have sold this place and used the money for herself, could have decided it wasn't worth the pain, but she didn't. She held on. Even when holding on meant living alone, even when it meant dying without ever seeing him. She held on because she believed he was worth it. And for 18 years, he had believed the opposite. But what if he chose differently now? What if he decided that she was right, that he was worth fighting for, that this broken down house and dead garden were worth saving? Not despite their brokenness, but because of it. He looked at the envelope in Hayes's hand. $100,000, a fresh start, a way to run, or 20 acres of dead land, a house with holes in its roof, a lavender bush with roots still alive in the soil, and a choice his grandmother had trusted him to make. I'm not selling. Hayes's smile froze. Mr. Cole, I don't think you understand. I understand fine. Ethan's voice came out steady. Steadier than he expected. This land isn't for sale. Think about what you're giving up. $100,000? You'll never see an offer like this again. Maybe not. You're making a mistake. This place will drain everything you have. The repairs alone will cost more than you can imagine. Hayes's voice had lost its smoothness. Something harder underneath now. You'll fail, and when you do, you'll call me. The offer won't be nearly as generous. Ethan met his eyes, held them. Then I'll figure it out. Hayes stared at him. The smile was completely gone now. His jaw worked. You're just like her. Stubborn. Short-sighted. Maybe I am. Hayes shoved the envelope back into his jacket. He walked to his SUV without another word. The engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed as he turned around and drove away, trailing dust that hung in the air long after he was gone. Ethan watched until the dust settled. Then he turned back to the house, to the broken porch, the sagging roof, the dead garden, his land, his home, his choice. He walked toward it, and for the first time, he didn't see a ruin. He saw the beginning of something. 3 weeks later, Ethan stood on the roof. The October sun was warm on his back. Sweat dripped down his forehead, stinging his eyes. He wiped it away with his forearm and positioned another shingle over the exposed wood, hammer nail, tap, tap, tap. The rhythm had become familiar. He'd learned it from videos on his phone and a library book with water-stained pages. The first row had taken an entire day. He'd wasted a dozen nails learning to swing the hammer right, bent half of them before figuring out the angle. Now he could finish a row before his arms gave out. The work was slow. Not pretty, but it held. That was what mattered. Sarah had offered him work at the diner, washing dishes after close, sweeping up, hauling trash. It didn't pay much, but it was enough for nails from the hardware store's damaged goods bin, enough for shingles with small dents that nobody else wanted, enough to keep going. The hole that had let in moonlight and rain was half-patched now. Rough work. A professional would shake his head at the crooked lines. But the last storm had passed, and the kitchen floor stayed dry. He heard the crunch of tires on gravel and looked up. Sarah's pickup pulled into the drive, dust rising behind the wheels. She stepped out carrying a basket covered with a blue checkered cloth and a thermos tucked under her arm. Figured you might be hungry. Ethan climbed down the ladder. His shoulders ached. His hands were raw despite the work gloves. Everything hurt in ways that had become familiar, the kind of hurt that meant something was getting done. They sat on the porch steps. The wood still sagged, but he'd reinforced the worst boards. Sarah had brought sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, ham and cheese on the thick bread. Simple, filling. She poured coffee from the thermos into tin cups. "Roof's looking better," she said. "Still got a long way to go." "Everything's got a long way to go." She handed him a cup. The coffee was strong and black, steam rising in the cool air. That's just how it works. They ate without talking. Not an awkward silence, the kind that settled between people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. A bird sang somewhere in the dead orchard. Ethan looked up. A small brown sparrow perched on a bare branch. Head tilted. "Haven't heard birds out here before. Give it time." Sarah took a sip of her coffee. "Everything comes back eventually. Just needs a reason to." After she left, Ethan went to the garden. He'd cleared the vegetable patch 2 weeks ago, pulled weeds by hand until his fingers were raw, turned the soil with a shovel he'd found rusting in the shed. The earth underneath was dark and rich dormant. Not dead. He'd planted seeds 3 days past. Winter lettuce, kale, cold hardy things that could handle frost. He didn't know if they would grow. Didn't know anything about gardening except what the library books told him. But seeds were cheap, and trying cost nothing but time. He walked to the corner of the garden, to the lavender. The stems above ground were still dry and brittle, gray-brown against the October sky. But he'd cleared away the dead weeds choking the base, and what he found underneath made him pause every time he looked. The roots were firm where they met the soil, solid, alive beneath all that dead wood, dormant, not dead, waiting for spring. Ethan crouched down and touched the base of the plant. Some days he still woke up wondering if he'd made a mistake, still heard Hayes' voice in his head. "You'll fail, and when you do, you'll call me." Some mornings, the doubt was so heavy he couldn't get out of bed for an hour. But then he'd come out here, see the roots, remember what his grandmother had written. "You have always had value." He filled the watering can at the outdoor spigot, the new one he'd installed himself. replacing pipes so rusted it crumbled in his hands. The water ran clear now. Small victories. He poured slowly around the lavender's base, watching the soil darken. "I'm taking care of it," he said quietly. "To no one? To her. Like you asked." The rest of the afternoon disappeared into work. He patched a crack in the kitchen wall with compound from the hardware store, tightened a cabinet door that had been hanging crooked, swept the floors, and cleaned the windows he'd replaced with salvaged glass from a barn sale 2 towns over. Small things, but the house looked different now, less abandoned, more like someone lived here. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, Ethan settled into the chair on the porch. The chair was new to him, wooden frame, faded cushion, found at the same barn sale. It creaked when he leaned back, but it held his weight. The photograph of his grandmother sat on the windowsill behind him. He'd cleaned the frame and placed it where the evening light would catch it. In the picture, she stood in front of this same house, holding lavender, looking straight into the camera with those patient, waiting eyes. She wasn't waiting anymore. The journal rested on the shelf inside, closed now. He'd read it 3 times through, knew the entries almost by heart. The pain, the persistence, the love that never stopped, even when stopping would have been easier. She had left him more than land, more than a falling down house. She had left him proof, 12 years of proof, that he mattered, that someone had fought for him when he couldn't fight for himself. He was worth something. Not because the world had decided it, but because she had believed it. And now, he was choosing to believe it too. The sun touched the horizon. Orange and red spread across the fields, turning dead grass to gold. Somewhere in the orchard, the sparrow sang again. Sarah had asked him earlier, while they sat on these same steps, "Don't you get lonely out here, all by yourself?" Ethan had thought about it. Really thought, "No," he'd said finally. "First time in my life, no." She'd nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. He looked out at the land. His land. 20 acres of brown grass and bare trees and fences that still needed fixing, but also a vegetable patch with seeds in the ground, a roof that no longer leaked when it rained, a lavender bush with roots waiting for spring, a beginning. The sun slipped below the horizon. The sky faded from orange to purple to deep blue. Stars appeared one by one. Ethan stayed on the porch, listening to the night sounds, crickets, wind through dry grass, the creak of the old house settling around him. Through the window, the photograph caught the last light. His grandmother's eyes, patient and knowing. "I made it," he said softly into the darkness. "I'm home." The wind stirred the dead grass. The lavender rustled in its corner. And somewhere in the quiet, he could almost hear her answer. Some stories leave us quiet. This one may have touched something that feels familiar, the weight of years spent believing something that wasn't true. The ache of distance from someone who was trying to reach us. The particular heaviness of learning we were loved in ways we couldn't see. Many of us have carried that kind of silence. Some of us have been the one waiting on a porch, watching a road. Some of us have been the one who didn't know anyone was waiting at all. Perhaps you've held something like this, a letter that never arrived, a call that couldn't get through, a door that stayed closed for reasons beyond anyone's control. It's all right if this story sits heavy in your chest tonight. Some things aren't meant to be neatly understood. They're meant to be felt, and then allowed to rest unfinished, unresolved, but no longer alone. We don't need to make sense of everything. We just need to know that someone else has stood in that same quiet place, looking at the same empty road, waiting for the same car that never came. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.